Many people believe their minds are ruined by fate, by bad luck, or by the cruelty of others. But the truth is far more sinister. Your mind is destroyed in 7 hidden places, psychological traps that you enter without ever noticing. Tonight, I will reveal these places so you may escape them before they devour you entirely. Before we journey in the hidden territories of the human mind, understand this. Corruption does not begin with grand disasters or dramatic betrayals. It begins quietly like a small crack in a marble statue, almost invisible at first, yet destined to collapse the entire structure over time. The landscape of mental corruption is not a physical kingdom with borders and fortresses. It is an inner geography shaped by your fears, your desires, and your blindness to your own weaknesses. And most people wander through this landscape unaware, stepping deeper into traps they never even see. As you listen, imagine I am placing a torch in your hand. What you illuminate will not always be comfortable. It may even anger you. But that is the price of clarity. A mind unexamined is a mind that decays in silence, and nothing destroys a person faster than silent decay. In this vast psychological territory, every path you choose carries consequences. Every thought becomes a stone in the walkway toward strength or ruin. And the sad truth is that, while people believe they are navigating their lives with intention, they are often guided by invisible forces that manipulate them like puppets. Here is the first truth: corruption begins with ignorance. Not the innocent ignorance of a child, but the stubborn ignorance of the self-satisfied. When a person stops questioning their habits, stops challenging their assumptions, stops observing their own tendencies, the mind becomes a kingdom left without a ruler. In such a kingdom, corruption thrives. A person who does not understand his own fears becomes ruled by them. A person who does not see his weaknesses becomes easy prey for anyone who does. And a person who believes he is entirely rational becomes the most irrational of all. Now, imagine standing in a sprawling valley of fog. This is the terrain where most minds dwell. In this fog, people mistake insecurity for humility, arrogance for strength, and dependency for loyalty. They build their self-worth on unstable ground and wonder why it collapses at the slightest pressure. They praise their own intentions while ignoring the consequences of their actions. They cling to comforting lies instead of brutal truths. And all the while, mental corruption spreads like rot beneath the floorboards. You may believe that corruption is something other people fall into. Weak minds, naive minds, desperate minds. But understand this clearly: every mind is corruptible. Even the strongest strategist can be undone by a blind spot. Even the most confident ruler can be sabotaged by his own ego. The landscape of mental corruption spares no one. It is a battlefield on which every person fights, whether they know it or not. The difference between the ruined and the powerful lies only in awareness. Let me guide you deeper. In this psychological realm, corruption begins as subtle influences. A single comparison to someone else plants seeds of envy. A moment of fear becomes a habit of avoidance. A flattering lie makes you comfortable. Dependency disguised as love softens your strength. Each small moment seems harmless, but together they form the terrain of destruction. The corrupted mind does not fall in one dramatic moment. It erodes grain by grain. And here is where the true danger lies. Mental corruption feels pleasant at first. It offers comfort, distraction, escape. It whispers, rest. Don't question yourself. Don't change. Don't confront the truth. It feeds the ego while starving the spirit. It calms your fears while tightening its hold around your freedom. It rewards your weakness and punishes your discipline. A corrupted mind is not a mind in pain. It is a mind sedated. This landscape is filled with illusions of safety. People cling to routine, convinced it keeps them stable, when in truth it keeps them stagnant. They cling to relationships that weaken them, convinced it is loyalty. They cling to identities they have outgrown, convinced it is authenticity. They cling to their past wounds, convinced it is memory. All these attachments become cracks in the mental fortress, allowing corruption to seep in. The greatest mistake, however, is believing that corruption comes from external forces. Yes, manipulation exists. Yes, people exploit weaknesses. Yes, society shapes thinking. But the deepest corruption comes from within. It is the voice that tells you to stay small, the voice that encourages excuses, the voice that fears responsibility, the voice that convinces you that comfort is more valuable than growth. This inner voice is the architect of your downfall, if you let it be. To walk through the landscape of mental corruption with awareness is to reclaim your sovereignty. It is to see your fears without bowing to them, to confront illusions without seeking refuge in them, to recognize weaknesses without shame. It is to understand that the mind must be ruled with discipline, or it will be ruled by cows. A mind without governance becomes its own enemy. And so, as this journey begins, I ask you one question: are you the ruler of your mind, or merely a wandering traveler lost in its dangerous terrain. If you wish to understand the dangers that corrupt the mind, you must first understand the fragile architecture upon which the human psyche is built. Human weakness is not an insult. It is a fundamental truth, one that rulers exploit, manipulators depend upon, and most people refuse to acknowledge. What destroys the mind is not merely the presence of traps, but the vulnerabilities that make those traps irresistible. And so, before we examine the dangerous places that ruin one's inner world, we must walk through the corridors of weakness itself, observing how it shapes every decision, every fear, every self-deception. Watch closely, for the greatest weakness of all is blindness to your own nature. People imagine themselves rational, composed, logical. They believe they are in control of their desires, immune to manipulation, resistant to fear. But the truth is far less flattering. The human mind is guided not by reason, but by subtle impulses you rarely notice. You react before you think. You desire before you understand why. You fear things that pose no real threat and trust things that will later betray you. This is not a flaw of the few. It is the condition of the many. Let us begin with the weakness of validation. Most people are ruled by the opinions of others more than they ever admit. They dress to impress, speak to be liked, hide their true beliefs to avoid conflict, and hold back their potential to avoid embarrassment. This desire for approval becomes a leash wrapped around the mind. The moment you depend on others to confirm your worth, you give them power over you, and those who control your worth can control your actions. This single weakness is enough to destroy a mind, for it replaces inner authority with external judgment. A person who seeks constant validation walks willingly into the hands of manipulators. There is also the weakness of fear. Fear of failure, of rejection, fear of change, fear of judgment. These fears form invisible chains. People avoid opportunities because they might fail. They avoid honesty because someone might disapprove. They avoid growth because it demands discomfort. Fear convinces the mind to stay small, to remain silent, to retreat rather than advance. And those who retreat become victims of their own inaction. A mind governed by fear never sees the truth clearly. It sees only the shadows of imagined disasters. And in those shadows, every dangerous psychological place thrives. Another weakness is emotional impulsiveness. Human beings love to believe they are guided by logic, yet they are often controlled by storms of emotion. Anger blinds them. Jealousy poisons them. Loneliness makes them cling to destructive relationships. Desire leads them into traps disguised as pleasure. Impulsiveness destroys discipline, and without discipline, the mind becomes an unguarded fortress. A single emotional decision can undo years of progress. A single burst of anger can ruin an opportunity. A single act of desperation can create a lifetime of regret. This weakness, when unrecognized, becomes a weapon others can easily turn against you. Then comes the weakness of self-deception. This is perhaps the most universal and the most dangerous. People lie to themselves more often than they lie to others. They tell themselves they are fine when they are breaking. They pretend they are strong when they are fragile. They deny their mistakes, dismiss their flaws, and justify their bad habits. They build entire identities around illusions. These illusions offer comfort, but comfort is the first step toward mental decay. A person who refuses to see himself truthfully is already on the path to destruction. The mind cannot be strengthened while chained to lies, no matter how sweet those lies may taste. There is also the weakness of dependency, emotional, financial, or psychological. When a person depends too heavily on another, their strength becomes borrowed, their confidence outsourced, their decisions influenced by the promise of comfort. Dependency dulls ambition, it weakens resilience, it turns the mind soft. Instead of learning to stand alone, people cling to the nearest support, even if that support is harmful. A dependent mind is easy to manipulate, easy to silence, and easy to break. It no longer seeks freedom, only comfort. And comfort is the enemy of growth. Let us not forget the weakness of ego. Ego convinces people they're always right, even when they are disastrously wrong. It prevents them from learning, from adapting, from listening. Ego seeks superiority, not wisdom. And in pursuit of superiority, the mind becomes blind. A person ruled by ego cannot see their flaws, cannot admit their ignorance, and cannot accept the guidance that would save them. This blindness makes them vulnerable to mistakes that could have been avoided. Ego destroys silently because it convinces the mind that nothing is wrong. Now, listen carefully. Human weakness does not make you helpless, it makes you human. The danger lies not in the existence of these weaknesses, but in your refusal to acknowledge them. When you deny your fears, they control you. When you hide your insecurities, they dictate your choices. When you ignore your emotional impulses, they sabotage your future. When you pretend your ego is strength, it becomes your downfall. To understand your weaknesses is not to degrade yourself. It is to gain the clarity needed to defend your mind. The purpose of understanding human weakness is not shame but power. Once you see how easily the mind bends, you learn how to strengthen it. Once you see the traps that exploit your vulnerabilities, you can avoid them. And once you understand the architecture of your flaws, you can rebuild yourself into someone who cannot be easily manipulated or broken. For only the mind that knows itself can rise above the dangers that seek to destroy it. To navigate the treacherous territories of the mind, you must first understand the truth. Most people live as exiles in their own inner world. They wander without direction, ruled by impulses, governed by fears, manipulated by illusions they mistake for reality. But there exists another path, a rare and demanding path. The path to mental sovereignty. This is the journey where you cease being a subject in your own psychological empire and rise to become its ruler. It is not a journey offered freely. It is earned through awareness, discipline, and the courage to face yourself without disguise. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a kingdom. Within its boundaries lie countless forces, pulling you in conflicting directions. Desire urges you forward. Fear restrains you, ego clouds your vision, memories drag you backward, while ambition whispers of a future waiting to be claimed. Most people allow these forces to battle freely, turning the mind into a chaotic battleground. They mistake this chaos for personality, for identity, for authenticity. But chaos is not identity, it is disorder. Mental sovereignty begins the moment you reclaim authority over these inner forces, directing them like a ruler commanding his counsel. Understand this clearly. Sovereignty does not mean suppressing your emotions, your desires, or your fears. It means mastering them. A wise ruler does not exile his advisors. He listens, evaluates, and decides with clarity. Just as a prince must be aware of every threat within and beyond his borders, you must be aware of the thoughts, impulses, and influences that shape your decisions. This awareness is the first step toward psychological freedom. Without awareness, you are merely reacting to life instead of directing it. But awareness alone is not enough. Many people become aware of their weaknesses, yet they remain enslaved to them. They know they procrastinate, but they delay anyway. They know a relationship is toxic, but they stay. They know a fear is irrational, yet they bow to it. Awareness without action is a decorative wisdom. Beautiful, impressive, but useless. Mental sovereignty requires action, deliberate, disciplined, and often uncomfortable action. Each time you choose discipline over impulse, clarity over illusion, truth over comfort, you fortify the throne of your mind. One of the most crucial aspects of mental sovereignty is the ability to separate what is real from what is imagined. The human mind is a masterful storyteller, crafting fears that never materialize, assumptions that never become truth, and narratives that justify your weaknesses. Most people live inside these mental stories, allowing them to dictate behavior. But a sovereign mind demands evidence, not imagination. It questions every fear, every assumption, every internal story, refusing to be ruled by shadows. When you challenge your thoughts, you weaken the chains that quietly control you. Another vital element is emotional discipline. This does not mean emotional coldness, it means emotional authority. When anger rises, you do not let it guide your actions. When fear whispers, you do not let it dictate your choices. When desire tempts you, you do not let it blind you. Emotional discipline is the crown of mental sovereignty, because a person who cannot command himself cannot command anything else. Each act of emotional mastery strengthens your inner kingdom. Then comes the art of detachment, a skill few possess, yet all need. Detachment does not mean indifference or lack of passion. It means the ability to observe your circumstances without becoming trapped within them. It means recognizing that you are more than your failures, more than your emotions, more than your temporary setbacks. Detachment allows you to see the bigger picture when others are consumed by the moment. It frees you from the desperate grasp of fear and the intoxicating pull of ego. This clarity is essential for true mental power. Another pillar of sovereignty is intentionality. Many people drift through life like leaves carried by the wind. They react, they adapt, they survive, but they do not direct. A sovereign mind chooses where it wants to go and aligns its actions accordingly. Intentionality is the sword with which you cut through distraction, temptation, and stagnation. When you live with intention, you no longer move merely because life pushes you, you move because you choose to. And this choice builds an inner strength that cannot be easily shaken. But perhaps the most transformative aspect of mental sovereignty is the act of confronting truth, especially the truths you prefer to avoid. It is easy to face the truths that flatter you. It is far harder to face the truths that expose your weaknesses, your mistakes, your self-deceptions. Yet these are the truths that set you free. A mind ruled by denial is a kingdom built on sand. A mind that confronts truth, however painful, builds foundations of stone. Each moment of honesty strengthens your character, sharpens your perception, and silences the inner voices that thrive on lies. As you continue along this path, you will discover that sovereignty is not a destination, but a state of constant vigilance. The forces that seek to corrupt your mind never disappear. They simply wait for moments of weakness. Fear returns. Ego returns. Impulse returns. But the sovereign mind does not collapse when these forces rise again. It stands firm, observes them, and chooses its response with clarity and authority. This consistency is what separates the mind that rules itself from the mind that is ruled by its chaos. And so, the path to mental sovereignty is not for the faint-hearted. It requires confronting your illusions, mastering your impulses, questioning your thoughts, disciplining your emotions, and acting with purpose even when every part of you seeks comfort. But for those who choose this path, the reward is unparalleled: a mind that cannot be manipulated, a spirit that cannot be broken, and an inner world governed not by weakness but by wisdom. Power is a strange and deceptive force. It seduces the ambitious, intimidates the timid, and blinds the arrogant. Yet the most dangerous aspect of power is not its presence in the world, but its presence in the mind. The shadows of power reach into every corner of human psychology. They influence your decisions, shape your loyalties, distort your perceptions, and alter your behavior long before you ever realize you've been touched by them. And if you do not confront these shadows with awareness, you will become their servant, not their master. Understand this truth. Every dangerous psychological place you will encounter is connected, in some way, to power. Whether it is the power you desperately chase, the power others wield over you, or the power you pretend you do not want, the influence is always there. People imagine power as something external: throne, a position, a title, a bank account. But the true landscape of power exists inside the mind. It thrives on your fears, your desires, your insecurities, your illusions. If you wish to protect your mind from destruction, you must recognize how power infiltrates your thoughts, even when you believe yourself unaffected. Power feeds on human weakness. It uses your longing for approval to control you. It uses your fear of rejection to silence you. It uses your desire for comfort to make you obedient. And the most subtle trap of all is when power convinces you that you are powerless. This belief alone is enough to collapse the spirit. The person who believes he is powerless no longer acts, no longer fights, no longer questions. He becomes an instrument shaped by the will of others. The shadows of power do not need to be loud. They only need you to remain unaware. Let me reveal something many never understand. Even those who seek power often become enslaved by it. Ambition, when unexamined, becomes a chain disguised as a crown. You begin chasing validation instead of purpose, reputation instead of integrity, admiration instead of wisdom. You begin living for applause instead of truth. The shadow of power whispers that your worth depends on how others see you. And once you believe that, you are no longer pursuing power. You are being controlled by the illusion of it. There is also the power that others impose upon you. This is the power of persuasion, manipulation, authority, tradition, expectation. Most people obey these forces not because they are weak, but because they were conditioned to. They accept opinions without question. They bow to pressure without resistance. They follow rules they never examined. They inherit beliefs they never chose. This form of power is not enforced with chains but with narratives. Whoever controls the narrative controls the mind, and the shadows of power grow thicker when you mistake inherited beliefs for truth. You must also be wary of the power that comes from emotional attachment. People underestimate how much influence others hold over them simply because they are loved, trusted, or admired. Affection becomes leverage. Loyalty becomes obligation. Guilt becomes manipulation. Many minds are destroyed not by enemies, but by the subtle expectations of those they care about. Emotional power is the most silent and the most potent. It makes you betray yourself in order to protect others, even when they do not deserve such sacrifices. But there is another shadow, perhaps the darkest of all, the power you refuse to acknowledge within yourself. Many people fear their own strength. They fear responsibility. They fear the weight of their potential. They fear becoming someone who can no longer hide behind excuses. And so, they sabotage themselves, shrink themselves, limit themselves. They play small because power feels dangerous. They would rather be safe than sovereign. They would rather be comfortable than capable. In this way, the greatest enemy is not the power others have over you, but the power you refuse to claim. The path to confronting the shadows of power begins with honesty. You must examine your ambitions, your relationships, your desires, and your fears. Ask yourself who truly controls your actions. Ask yourself what influences your choices. Ask yourself which beliefs you hold because they are true and which you hold because they were given to you. A mind that does not question itself becomes the perfect host for manipulation. The shadows grow strongest in the minds that never look at them. To confront power, you must also confront your own hunger for it. Power itself is not dangerous. Ignorance about power is. If you do not understand your own motivations, you will misuse power and it will corrupt you. If you fear power, you will avoid opportunities that could elevate you. If you pretend power doesn't matter, you will be ruled by those who understand it better. The wise do not fear power, nor do they worship it. They study it. They respect it. They handle it carefully, like a blade that can cut both others and themselves. And remember this, power does not corrupt everyone, but it reveals everyone. It exposes insecurities, amplifies desires, and magnifies flaws. If a person is greedy, power makes the greed visible. If a person is insecure, power makes their insecurity public. If a person is wise, power expands their wisdom. Power is a mirror, not a mask. When you seek power, you must ask yourself what it will reveal about you. As you walk through life, you will encounter people who try to control you, systems that try to shape you, and illusions that try to deceive you. You will face your own ambitions pulling you in one direction and your fears pulling you in another. Power will tempt you, challenge you, and test you. But if you confront its shadows with awareness, you will begin to see clearly where others remain blind. For the mind that understands power cannot be easily manipulated. The mind that sees its own weaknesses cannot be easily conquered. And the mind that confronts the shadows of power learns to walk through darkness without losing itself. You have now walked through the hidden corridors of the mind. Those dangerous places where fear is crafted, illusions take root, ego blinds, and weakness becomes a weapon used against you. You have seen how the landscape of mental corruption forms beneath your awareness, how human vulnerabilities become the doorways through which destruction enters, how sovereignty over the self must be earned through discipline and truth, and how the shadows of power influence you more deeply than you ever imagined. These are not lessons meant to entertain, they are warnings meant to awaken. For the greatest tragedies of the human mind are not accidents. They are the result of ignorance, habit, and surrender. Understand this. Every dangerous psychological place only destroys those who walk through it blindly. The moment you become aware of these traps, you gain the ability to step around them, rise above them, or turn them into tools of strength. Your mind is not doomed to decay. It is not destined for weakness. It is shaped by the choices you make each day. The thoughts you allow, the emotions you command, the truths you confront, and the power you choose to claim or deny. If you choose vigilance, you build resilience. If you choose clarity, you build wisdom. If you choose sovereignty, you build an inner kingdom no force can easily conquer. The purpose of this journey has not been to frighten you, but to illuminate the battlefield upon which every person must fight. The dangers are real, but so is your ability to overcome them. The mind can be corrupted, yes, but it can also be disciplined, sharpened, fortified, and transformed. And once you learn to rule your inner world with intention, the outer world becomes far less threatening. Power loses its ability to manipulate you. Fear loses its ability to pause you. Illusion loses its ability to mislead you. Weakness loses its ability to sabotage you. So walk forward now not as a wanderer, but as one who understands the terrain, not as a victim of unseen forces, but as a strategist who recognizes every trap. Not as a mind at risk of destruction, but as a sovereign who commands his inner kingdom. The dangers remain, but you are no longer blind to them.